Chapter 16, Battles of Fisher's Hill and Woodstock Races. True to his promise, Sheridan was after them the next morning. At daylight, Merritt's division, our regiment in advance, pushed briskly south up the valley pike through Newtown and Middletown, but met no opposing force until reaching Fisher's Hill, where we found Early strongly entrenched. During the day, the infantry came up and took position confronting the Confederates. Sheridan's maneuverings led Early to believe that he contemplated a direct front assault, but he had other plans. Learning from a reliable guide that an army could be marched by forest paths behind Little North Mountain, cross over, and strike the enemy's left flank and rear, he resolved to send Crook's corps to execute such a movement. So on the 22nd, while our infantry made strong demonstrations in front, Crook, with great secrecy and celerity, reached the desired point of attack. The Confederates, busy with our troops at the front, were wholly unconscious of the heavy force of men with loaded rifles and fixed bayonets stealing stealthily up behind them. A volley poured into their backs, a ringing cheer, and a furious charge into their trenches was the first warning the Confederates received of their impending calamity. Taking advantage of the panic in the enemy's rear, our whole line in front moved forward with a cheer, and again the rebel army was panic-stricken and fleeing without semblance of organization, leaving 1,400 prisoners, 16 cannon, and most of their wagon train in our hands. Wilson's cavalry and all our division except Devon's brigade were sent around through the Luray Valley under Torbert to cut off Early's retreat. The chase on the pike was taken up by our brigade, the Dragoons in the lead, and kept up all night and part of next day until the enemy made a stand at Mount Jackson, where we charged and routed them. Again, darkness had saved the rebel army. We, however, picked up a large number of stragglers and captured 2 more pieces of artillery. Sheridan expected great results from the Luray Valley expedition, but the incompetent and vacillating Torbert made a complete failure. Speaking of this fizzle on the part of Torbert, Sheridan says, "I was astonished and chagrined. My disappointment was extreme. To this day I have been unable to account for Torbert's failure. Neither can we account for the keen and discerning Sheridan's appointment and retention of a man so wholly unfitted for the position of Chief of Cavalry." Right at this time, General Averill had also failed to meet Sheridan's expectations and thus incurred his displeasure. Irritated and angered by these failures, it would seem he sought some object upon which to vent his spleen, and instead of removing the really incompetent Torbert, that splendid fighter, the gallant Averill, became the victim of his pent-up wrath, and was most unjustly deposed from the command he had so highly honored. Having overheard the entire conversation between Sheridan and Averill, it can be stated from positive knowledge that while Averill maintained a calm and civil demeanor, Sheridan manifested unreasonable anger, refusing to listen to any explanations Averill desired to offer. Sheridan may have believed he had some provocation, but there was certainly no excuse for arbitrarily trampling upon all military courtesy and justice, and cruelly consigning a gallant officer to ignominy and disgrace without a hearing. On the morning of the 24th, we moved out early in pursuit of the retreating enemy, the Dragoons in the advance. We soon overtook them and now commenced a lively and intensely exciting race. The regiments of our brigade had been detached for various purposes, and at this time the 9th New York was off in search of a rebel train, leaving for a time the 1st New York, the only cavalry in direct pursuit. Before us we could see the entire infantry of Early's army. In our immediate rear came our infantry, crowding forward at a rapid gait, but as soon as they came within firing distance, the Johnnies would strike a double quick, and we would charge their rear, annoying them as much as possible. In the meantime, Taylor's battery behaved splendidly, constantly pouring a red-hot fire into their ranks. Says Sheridan, "While all this was going on, the open country permitted us a rare and brilliant sight, the bright sun gleaming from the arms and trappings of the thousands of pursuers and pursued." Regarding the Battle of New Market, Devon says, "I came up with the enemy's line of battle in front of New Market. Ordering Taylor's battery to the front, I opened with shell and spherical case shot, at the same time advancing the 1st New York as skirmishers. The enemy at once replied with a battery. I had pressed up to within 500 yards when the enemy retired precipitately through the town. I charged halfway through the main street, but a hot fire from the enclosures and gardens forced me back. I now dismounted 2 squadrons of the 1st New York, cleared the town, charged through with the rest of the command, and found another line formed 300 yards beyond, which retired as my skirmishers advanced. The chase continued in this manner for 7 miles south of New Market. Nothing could surpass the gallantry with which my little force, less than 400 men, continued to press the enemy's lines, though at times 2 miles from support. In one of these charges between Newmarket and Harrisonburg, the enemy turned a battery upon a group with Colonel Gibbs. I was orderly bugler and close to the colonel when a shell struck in front, ricocheted, and bursting between Old Blue and my horse, disemboweled mine, but did not seriously injure either the colonel or any of the group. September 25th, we followed up the retreating enemy to Harrisonburg, where we found some 400 wounded Johnnies. Turning to the left, we followed on to Kieseltown, and next day to Port Republic, picking up small squads of prisoners. About this time, General Merritt came up with the balance of the division, and we drove the enemy to the mouth of Brown's Gap just in time to meet Kershaw's division of infantry on its way to join Early. They at once attacked us, and a very lively battle occurred in which the Dragoons lost 3 killed and some wounded, among them Major Scott, but he heroically remained on the field until the fight was over. While in this vicinity, we encamped for the night near Wyer's Cave, and many of us paid a visit to this remarkable cavern, and were fascinated by its features of natural beauty and grandeur. We were told that it ranked next to the Mammoth Cave of Kentucky. Quoting from Devon, September 28th, the 1st New York Dragoons were sent to McGaughystown and drove the enemy's cavalry out of that place. On the 29th, the brigade swung around by Port Republic, Piedmont, and Valley Pike to Mount Crawford, burning 82 barns containing hay and grain, 72 stacks of hay and grain, 5 flouring mills, 2 sawmills, an iron furnace, and drove in 321 cattle and 200 sheep, encamping at Cross Keys on the 30th. After several days of scouting and skirmishing, we began moving down the valley, driving all stock before us and leaving desolation in our wake. Again, quoting from Devon, October 8th, marched to Tom's Brook. The 9th New York were deployed to the right and the 1st New York Dragoons to the left for the purpose of destroying grain, etc. These 2 regiments burnt 115 barns filled with hay and grain, 206 stacks of grain, 18 flouring and grist mills, 18,000 bushels of wheat with woolen mills and sawmills. Also drove in 290 cattle, 319 sheep, and 75 hogs. Reader, you can imagine something of the awful desolation when all the other regiments deployed across the entire valley were as destructive as ours. From Mount Jackson, the writer counted from just one standpoint 167 barns in flames at one time. October 3rd, between Harrisonburg and Dayton, Sheridan's chief engineer officer was treacherously murdered not far from headquarters. The murderers had been secretly harbored by residents, and in this vicinity the dwelling houses were also burned. On the 8th, as we moved down the valley on our work of destruction, the rebel cavalry saw fit to follow us up. We were well out on the left flank, and when near Tom's Brook, were suddenly attacked from the rear, and in Southern parlance, hit was a right smart scrimmage. The advantages gained were decidedly in our favor, the enemy being chased back several miles. Woodstock races. The rebuff we gave them failed to check their audacity, for we had scarcely halted for the night ere their entire cavalry force, under Rosser, suddenly appeared in our immediate rear, halting on a rise of ground and within hailing distance of our camp. Had they at that time charged, they would have taken us at a great disadvantage, as we had unsaddled, and were getting our supper. Of course, we were quickly in an attitude of defense, but no demonstrations were made on either side that night. Sheridan's voluntary retreat down the valley had given the enemy the false impression that they were driving him. I never understood how the enemy was permitted to make so near an approach without warning from a rear guard, unless such a guard had carelessly been omitted. General Rosser, with a fresh brigade of veteran cavalry, had just come from Richmond, and with a great flourish of trumpets proclaimed himself the savior of the valley. Angered at our work of destruction, he was spoiling for a fight in which he might wreak vengeance upon the barn-burning Yankees. Sheridan, tired of these annoyances, concluded to give the cheeky and boastful Confederate a lesson that would open his eyes. So he instructed Merritt and Custer to go out next morning and whip those fellows, or get whipped themselves, also stating that he should ride up to Round Top Mountain and watch the battle. At daybreak, the movement commenced, soon to become famous under the name of Woodstock Races, a title facetiously originated by Colonel Gibbs. The contending forces were about equal. Out swept the 2 boy generals, Merritt and Custer, at the head of their respective divisions, to meet the boastful Rosser and Lomax. Merritt's left moved on the Valley Pike, while Custer's right moved on the back road, running parallel with the pike, but 3 miles distant. Across this intervening space of 3 miles, together with the overlap on the pike, was a line of battle nearly 4 miles in length. Our brigade, headed by Uncle Tommy, otherwise nicknamed the Old War Horse, was near the center, from which point, looking either way, could be seen the splendid line of battle advancing to meet the overconfident enemy. It was a magnificent place for a cavalry fight, smooth ground and free from fences. Both sides deployed in full view of each other, the skirmishers opening with their carbines. It is said that as our line approached, Rosser triumphantly remarked to his staff, "Gentlemen, I intend to give those Yanks the worst whipping today they ever got. See if I don't." The engagement soon became general across the valley, and for nearly 2 hours both sides struggled for the mastery, numerous charges and countercharges being made. But the opportune moment came when, as at Winchester, there rang out those stirring commands, "Forward! Draw sabers! Charge!" And the long line, with irresistible momentum, crushed upon the Confederates like an avalanche. In the center there was stubborn resistance, but before they realized what had happened, Merritt and Custer had curled around their right and left flanks with such impetuosity that the entire line broke in the wildest confusion. Says Sheridan, the result was a general smash-up, the retreat degenerating into a rout, the like of which was never before seen. For 26 miles this wild stampede was kept up, with our troopers close at the enemy's heels, and the ludicrous incidents of the chase never ceased to be amusing topics around the campfires of Merritt and Custer. Our captures were 11 pieces of artillery with their caissons, all their wagon train and ambulances, also 300 prisoners, while our loss was small. There could hardly have been a more complete victory, the cavalry totally covering themselves with glory and adding to their long list of victories the most brilliant of them all. On our return from the chase, there occurred one of the most ludicrous incidents of our experience. The great victory had put our staid old colonel into a sportive mood, and he sent his orderlies along the marching column directing the men, as they passed through Edinburgh or Woodstock in the darkness, to set up the greatest racket possible. The boys needed only a hint, and bedlam was let loose. Such a conglomeration of sounds was never before heard. Everyone tried to outdo the others in hideous and demoniacal yells, screechings, and cat yowls. They bleated, bellowed, cackled, and crowed, while the buglers in Jackson's band produced unearthly discords by tooting each instrument in a different key, and the drummers beating out of time. The hubbub was contagious, spreading to other regiments until the inhabitants must have imagined themselves in a veritable pandemonium. We had now captured most of Early's artillery, and a fresh supply was sent him from Richmond. Some humorist attached this label to the guns, "General Sheridan, care of Jubal Early, a daring deed." In the fall of 1864, as the army was moving up the valley, the Dragoons in advance, two of the regiment, performed a deed of valor which for presumptuous audacity and perfect success was unsurpassed during the war. Lieutenant William W. Tatter and his company bugler, Adelbert Brown, were sent through a piece of woods to ascertain if the enemy occupied certain crossroads. Before emerging from the timber, they discovered a 4-mule team hauling an army wagon containing 19 Johnnies, each with a loaded gun. The boys promptly decided to make the desperate attempt to capture the entire outfit. Said the lieutenant, "Deb, go to the edge of the woods and sound the charge for all that's in you, and when I give the order of forward, yes, we will yell like a pack of devils and go for them." Tatter began shouting his commands to what the Rebs supposed to be a large company of Yanks, and as the two surrounded the wagon, he ordered the driver, in as forcible language as he could command, to whip up them mules and get out right smart. The Rebs were so thoroughly frightened that they made no resistance, and were driven first to Devon's headquarters, then to Merritt's, both generals highly complimenting the boys for their gallantry. The Johnnies, learning the facts of their capture, declared it was that Dodd-blasted bugle that fooled them.